The morning rush hour in Los Angeles was as busy as ever. Robert Downey Jr. was returning from a radio interview. He was a superhero in most people's eyes, but on the inside, he still carried traces of his past. That morning, even though the weather seemed cheerful, there was a heaviness in Robert's soul. As he remembered those dark days, his eyes fell on a young man slumped on a street corner. The young man was taking shelter next to a rusty rubbish bin, holding his head in his hands. His clothes were tattered, his shoes were almost shredded. People walked past him, but no one noticed him. Robert paused for a moment. His childhood traumas, his dark years of drugs and being lost were so familiar to him. He pulled his car over and went up to the young man. "Hey, young man, are you all right?" he asked. The young man answered without looking up. "Leave me alone." Robert didn't give up. "I want to help you. I once felt like you," he said. But the youth smiled wryly and averted his eyes. "What do you know? I don't expect someone with money and fame to understand." At that moment, Robert thought back to his past. He had once thought the same way. Even though people wanted to help, he had seen it as a weakness. But one thing was clear: something had to change in this young man's life. Robert persuaded the young man, picked him up, and drove him to a nearby cafe. They ordered a coffee in silence. "What is your name?" asked Robert. The young man hesitantly answered, "Ethan." As he listened to Ethan's story, a knot formed inside Robert. Ethan had lost his parents in a car accident the year before. Depression had introduced him to drugs. At first, he said he only used them to forget his pain. But over time, things spiraled out of control. Now he was homeless, had lost his friends, and the scars of drugs were clearly visible on his body. "Nothing's going to change," Ethan said with empty eyes. "It's impossible to get out of this hole." Robert recalled his own memory of the crisis, those dark days in prison, the disappointment in the eyes of his family, those moments when the producers turned their backs on him. Everyone had given up on him. But one day he felt that someone believed in him. A small word from a friend, "There's still something in you," lifted him up again. Now he had to instill that same hope in Ethan, but because of Ethan's addiction, the crisis erupted as he was leaving the cafe. Ethan's hands began to shake when he saw a drug dealer walking down the street. He turned to Robert and whispered, "I need to talk to him." Robert grabbed Ethan by the arm and stopped him. "No, Ethan, I'm not going to take you back to that darkness. I felt the same way you have, and I know it's hard to let go of this pain right now, but if you give up now, nothing will change." Ethan was silent for a while. A tear fell from his eye. Robert took his hands and continued, "No one can fight this fight for you, but I can be there for you." Robert persuaded Ethan to go to a rehabilitation center. However, Ethan escaped the first night. Robert was deeply disappointed when he found out, but he didn't give up. The next morning, he found Ethan again. He was sleeping on the streets. "I want you to sit down and talk to me," Robert said. Ethan sat on the floor, defeated. "Why are you doing this? Who am I that you spend so much time on me?" Ethan asked. Robert was silent for a while. "Because once upon a time, I was a man waiting to be rescued. Someone believed in me. Now it's your turn." Ethan returned to the rehabilitation center with tears in his eyes. The treatment process was painful. Robert was with Ethan every step of the way. He told him about his old days, his failures, and how it felt to start over. After months of treatment, Ethan managed to get rid of his addiction. When he left the rehabilitation center, he was a man who could see the future. Robert was not only a hero to him, but also a mentor. Months later, the young man successfully completed his rehabilitation process. Robert was with him at his graduation ceremony. The young man hugged Robert and said, "You saved my life." This event changed Robert's life once again. From that day on, he decided to set up a charitable foundation to help young people struggling with addiction. Robert Downey Jr. proved once again that he is a hero not only as Iron Man, but also in real life. As a man who managed to get out of the dark spiral of drugs, he became a light to others.